Hi, I'm Sean Carlock. Welcome to Send It 22. Today we're going to talk about scopes for long-range shooting and their features and why you may want to pick one over another. And boy, we're just about down to it. We get a scope mounted on this baby and it's off to load development, and we can actually go have some fun with this project. I will not pull any punches here in optics. Optics are like so many other things. For the most part, you pretty much get what you pay for. I have a Nightforce scope on every long-range rifle I own. And I don't have them on there because we're part of the pro staff or because we get them at half price or anything like that. If they cost twice as much as they did, I would still have them. I wouldn't have as many, but I'm going to have the very best gear I can put together that I can afford, of course. And for my money, that is the Nightforce scope. There's scopes out there that cost more money, but I don't feel like they offer a single advantage over what we get in the Nightforce scope. So, enough said. Like I said, I have them on every rifle I own. Let's talk about the features you may want to choose. This particular scope is the Nightforce ATAC-R. It's a 34mm tube, and that's something to consider right off the bat. The bigger the tube, the more internal elevation adjustment the scope is likely to have. A scope like this is going to have 120, 125 minutes of usable elevation adjustment after your 100-yard zero if you have a correctly tapered base. And that is about all the scope is capable of, but 125 minutes will take care of 99.9% of the people out there. That's a lot of adjustment. I don't want to be held back by the fact that I only had 60 minutes of adjustment in my scope, and I've used up all the reticle, and I still feel like I'm holding a good group and reading the wind, but I just can't hold on the target anymore. So I want plenty of adjustment in the scope. Now, next feature I want to talk about is zero stops. Several manufacturers have a version of a zero stop. If your zero stop uses shims underneath the cap, where you're physically bottoming out the cap against some kind of a platform, whether it be adjustable, shim stacked, whatever, that will work, but it has a downside. You can, because you're screwing down and it's tightening up against the threads each time, can develop some backlash in the turret because of the stress you put on the threads. Not a system I'm a fan of. If you have a clutch mechanism, which you're only going to get on a Nightforce because of course it was a great idea and they patented the crap out of it, then the clutch is tightened up and the clutch bottoms out against the turret housing, and you no longer have that issue where you're putting all that stress against the threads. So you just don't develop that backlash over years and years and years of use. The other feature we want to talk about, first focal plane or second focal plane. Depends on what you're doing with the gun. PRS shooters, boy, almost everybody's running first focal plane, and there's a good reason for that. Because of the target engagements, the multiple targets and multiple distances, first focal plane can be an advantage here. For almost everything I do other than that, I tend to like a second focal plane scope better simply because of the way I use them, but that is a matter of personal preference. There are downsides and pros to both of those things. First focal plane scopes, very difficult to get a good fine crosshair on high power that you can still see on low power. Second focal plane scope, you can get a good thin crosshair all the time, but now the reticle is not calibrated at every power it's on. It's only calibrated at one set power. Usually that's maximum power. But for the way I use them, that's not an issue. That doesn't affect me any, and I would rather have the thinner, finer crosshair to work with than to have it calibrated perfectly at all different powers, because rarely do I not use it on high power. Let's talk about power. Let's talk about how much power. Some guys want to put a telescope. They want the Hubble on their rifle. I want all the magnification I can get. In the long-range shooting world, there's two issues with that. Most of the time, there's only a certain power you can get to before mirage and atmospheric conditions start hindering your ability to use the scope above a certain power. About 25, I like 22 to 25 for a couple reasons. 30-32 is a good power, but when you start going higher in power, you start losing elevation adjustment internally in the scope. I would rather have 22 to 25 power and 125 minutes of adjustment than to have, say, 32-35 power and only have 70 or 80 minutes of adjustment. So I tend to hold pretty true right into that 5 to 25 neighborhood as far as variable power range goes. The last thing I want to talk about is click values and turrets. There's two ways to go here. You can go minute of angle, you can go mils. I like minute of angle. For me, the minute of angle math is just easier, quicker to do in my head. Does that mean that mils are garbage and they don't work? Of course not. Mils can work great. A lot of guys use them and are quite happy to them. It's a matter of personal preference. If you have the opportunity, try and get behind both and use them like you're going to use them before you buy one, because you're laying out a significant amount of money. Be sure you're getting what you want. Now, the last thing in terms of mils, minutes, turret adjustments and stuff is how many graduations we have to a revolution. Some scopes will only have 10 minutes to a revolution, and when you're shooting big distance, be cranking on it 7, 8, 9 turns. If you can get 20 or 30 minutes to the revolution in the scope you're choosing, to me that's a big benefit, because then I'm only up 2 or maybe 3 turns at the most, and that's just less place for error, less counting, 1, 2, 3, 4. I like a speedy turret. I don't want to have to put a speed wrench on it to get it up there 70 or 80 minutes. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is color, distortion, and clarity of your glass. I've had a number of customers say, oh man, I want this scope. It's so much more clear than this other scope I was looking through. And that's great. But to me, the big issues are the click values consistent? Are they solid? Is it reliable? Is it bomb proof? Does it help me not make mistakes by having a zero stop? Does it have these other features? Whether the glass has the most crisp color or the most perfect clarity in glass aren't as high on my list of importance as other features. I really have to have the scope that runs up exactly how much I want and comes right back down to zero. It'll box test out. There are a whole bunch of issues more important to me than is the clarity this minuscule amount difference than this other scope. People will talk about light transmission and clarity numbers. For the most part, a good scope is a good scope in terms of clarity and light transmission from the way I look at it, and people with a calameter or an optical comparator can probably tell you the difference and put a number on it, but I say that most people can't tell the difference in the field. A good quality piece of glass you can shoot way past legal shooting light with anyway, so that isn't such an issue to me. So let's get this baby mounted up on the gun, and we aren't far from putting some rounds down range.
Spotter's ready?
I'm on it.
Send it. Boom, right dead center.
Dead center.
Dead center. I mean, maybe 3 or 4 inches to the left.
2,751 yards.
That's awesome. There, that was an awesome shot, Sean, at over 2,700 yards.